to the Coach Hazey podcast.
Welcome to Coach Hazey's podcast. Our first guest of the show is Kris O'Hare. Welcome, Kris. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you very much, Lee. My name is Christopher J. O'Hare for my parents whenever they're angry at me. And I come from Merseyside, Liverpool. I have coached in various different places throughout the world, much like Lee. And now I find myself in sunny Spain, Villareal, working as a sports psychologist coach.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. Okay, would you like to tell me about your coaching journey and where it all started, your passion? Did you play? What is the reasons why you got into coaching?
Yeah, definitely. The playing thing is interesting. I played more in my mind than anywhere else, to be completely honest. So people often ask, were you a good player? And even now in training, when I'm playing with the lads, when we do shooting drills and so on, if we're one short, maybe somebody goes on or something like that. And usually I'll go on because I used to be a striker. And I used to be able to put the ball in the back of the net.
Mm.
And it does say something when the lads from under 18 or under 16 Villareal, an elite club, are saying to you, "Oh, you're really good." However, I'd say that's where it ended. So I'd say that I wasn't a particularly great player in my school. I don't think anyone would have ever thought anything of me
Yeah.
in that regard. And all throughout my football youth, I always found myself in situations with, quite frankly, with coaches or with teams that were just terribly managed, terribly managed. I think it's part of my inspiration of where I've got.
Yeah.
And then related to my journey, I first worked in China. I flew out to China, worked in China, coaching, not serious, little bit in Japan as well, much like yourself, but nowhere near the level you're working in Japan. Then after that, Korea, a little bit in Barcelona mixed in there as well. Then I was working in Korea again, and I had a decision whether to go back to the UK and do things the traditional route, go back to the UK, wait for years to get on coaching courses, pull my hair out, which luckily I've still got enough of. And eventually I realized that wasn't going to get me anywhere. So I decided to come to Spain. I came to Spain with zero Spanish. That's genuine. Okay, yes, I did take Spanish classes in school up to year 9. However, never ever knew anything to the degree where my teacher literally hated my guts, and rightfully so, I think. I was a pain in the backside. And then came to Spain, worked for a club called Castellon for 3 years. Luckily, they saw the potential that I had. Won a few leagues, won a few trophies. And then after that, local community project, working with players who are a very high level, but perhaps would never the good enough boys to make it in any of the academies. One of the players got scouted for the national selection, which is really, really rare for a player who isn't in basically any of the top academies. And as a result, my games got scouted, and that's how Villareal got an eye on me and saw me, and I got signed, and it's been like a dream ever since. I've got to be honest.
Oh, amazing. It's an amazing journey. So you said, Korea and China and Japan. Um, how did you adapt in terms of, from England, the different cultures? Like, what was your coping strategies? What was your challenges in terms of that?
Yeah, I think that you'll know a lot about this in those cultures. You do have to adapt an enormous amount. It's about meeting them halfway continuously, and a lot of the time more than halfway.
Mm.
And you can't really complain about that, because when someone comes to the UK, one of the biggest problems is integration, not
Yeah.
necessarily immigration,
Mm.
So integration is a huge part of any society, so you can't complain. You've just got to jump in.
Yeah.
Luckily, my psychology background, I was able to adapt and understand and maximize my ability to communicate very quickly. I know that, for example, 89% of communication is non-verbal.
Yeah.
So I'm able to maximize that very, very quickly. I
Yeah.
know that different nations or different cultures learn in different ways, so I was able to maximize that very quickly. And as a result, I was able to perhaps connect with the players in a deeper way without at times even speaking the same language.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Um, so in Spain, so your next journey went to Spain, and in terms of what was your challenges in Spain? You know, did you come up against player challenges? Were there any, you know, coach challenges? You know, did people look at you a bit different, or did you just hit the ground running? And you said about learning Spanish. How was that? You know, how did that go?
Right, so one of my first training sessions, I remember a coach saying a fairly basic Spanish word to me.
Mm,
And I remember it like it was no one's business. And this is one of these typical things of, I think Jurgen Klopp talks about in his time at Mainz when he was just hanging around like a bad smell, right? And he said a word to me, and I know what the word was. It was basically to make a line of cones, but he said it to me with a little bit of a hito, which
mm,
basically means small in
yeah.
Spanish. So if you put hito on the end of words, it means small.
Mm,
And basically, I my head went west,
yeah.
and I was looking at him like, I've got no idea what you want here. And I think that the thing that served me well was the ability to work in many different cultures beforehand meant that my brain was able to pick up Spanish very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Because
That's
you'll
good.
know more, you'll know them more than most. When you are in different cultures, your brain gets used to it quicker.
Yeah.
You're able to adapt quicker. You're able not necessarily to think what's the word, but what's the context.
Yeah, of course.
What's that context, and then how can I understand that? And that does it puts a lot of strain on the brain, but it also creates what we call plasticity within the brain, whereby your brain doesn't stop growing. So usually people around the age of 25, the brain stops growing completely. And
Mm.
that's when we see, usually within football, formed footballers.
Yes, yeah.
That's why it is. Now,
Yeah.
no one in football actually knows that, but that's what it is. The
No, no.
brain.
I agree with you. Like, you know, people, you know, especially UK, they call late developers, you know, players get released 16, 17, 18. And people say about decision making, you know, your brain's not fully developed until what, 23. So, you know, you're releasing players at the age of 16, 17, and then all of a sudden you tell them, oh, they got to make right decisions, but you know, the brain's not really developed at that time. So like I said, you know, I'm like you, I know about the brain and, you know, studied a little bit, not at your level, but psychology as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
I always think with these type of things that, you're essentially, how can I say this? You're essentially trying to meet whenever you're in a different culture, you're essentially trying to understand as much as anything the way the culture view football,
Mm,
the way they interpret the football, the way they view it, are the way they want it to be seen. And I think that one of the biggest adaptations to me, especially coming from the cultures I was in, was the way they implement football here in Spain is such a high level. The
mm,
coaching is I have a lot of opinions about
yeah.
coaches. I have a lot of opinions about training sessions.
Mm,
I think that, for example, everything can be improved. Big believer in could be improved, could be better. Um, However, here in Spain, you see a lot of training sessions where you genuinely like everybody has their specific role within the training session. The players, I mean, all the coaches are having the training sessions, and
mm,
and and within that, I absolutely love it. I
Mm.
love the attention to detail. I love it when there's a small debate or argument about,
Yeah.
for example, well, no, let's not do that because of this, and it, because that's how you get to the point where you're maximizing things.
Mm. And you get stretch, isn't it? As an individual, you look at it
Exactly, yeah.
differently. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Like I said, I know you spoke about your journey to Spain, but like why Spain? Like I know in Spain there's a lot of passion and they talk about, they love that, they're kind of similar to Brazil in terms of the football and everyone
Yeah.
talk about, the rondos, like I've never coached in Spain, but I've been to a tournament and stuff like that. So what's your take on it? And in terms of the grassroots level, do you see any grassroots level football or in terms of that?
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. I try to watch a lot of football.
mm,
Although at the same time I try to keep my brain fresh as well.
yeah,
I want to go to training. Every time I go to training, I want to bounce into training.
yeah,
So I think it's very important to strike that balance.
yeah,
In in regard to in regard to the Spanish way,
mm,
so to speak, and adapting to that. Um, yeah, I think it took me a while to understand the way in which they were really implementing things that were
mm,
so technically based.
yeah.
So there's a lot of long process type training.
Okay.
So when I talk about long process type training, we have to understand that any sort of what you would call -1 day before game analytical training
Yeah.
is not long-term training.
Okay.
It's it's for me it's a bit of anti-coaching at
Mm,
times because what's happening there is the coach is saying, right, we're going to remove all sort of rhythm from the training. We're going to
mm,
remove all sort of real game environment play.
mm,
And we're going to analyze things very, very slowly with them in a dictatorial manner,
mm,
pointing things out and doing this and saying, when he goes there, where do you go?
yeah.
And there's no evidence this actually works. There's
Mm,
no evidence that this slow analytical teaching works. It looks like it works because everybody's listening and so on.
mm,
So within Spain, there's a lot of get them playing. And
mm,
then it's your job as a coach to move everything in the direction of the game. So,
yeah.
for example, if the other team are playing with a high press, then you need to initiate a high press within training, and that is within the three phases:
Mm,
the micro, the meso, the macro. And then get those three phases looking as close to game like situation as possible.
okay. Interesting.
So within a small sided game, for example, you would have, if you were practicing for a high press, you would have your build up, and then you'd
Mm,
have maybe, maybe at times a 2 versus 3, and the 3 attacking the 2,
yeah.
right? Okay, well, how often do you see that in coaching? Very rarely. But is
Mm,
it real? Is that where the goal comes from? Yes,
mm,
100%.
mm,
They drop someone comes up from the midfield, lays a third press on, and then all of a sudden, how are you going to cope with that?
yeah.
Well, just telling people how to cope with it doesn't necessarily work.
Mm,
However, if you run them through the experience, a high tempo, high
mm,
rhythm in free exercises, they'll very quickly adapt and understand what they need to do in a game-like scenario.
yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why Spanish players are so tactically adept, is because they run it as real as possible.
Mm. So they want to paint that picture, very similar scenarios within the game, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. It has to be as game real as possible, and at times I visited a lot of clubs in my time, and
Mm,
without naming any, of course, because that would never be fair.
yeah.
At times you watch training sessions and you think, yeah, I could have played that pass. And if
Yeah.
I could have played that pass, there's a problem here.
Yeah.
Because this should be elite football. And
No,
in
100%.
elite football, it's in my vision of football, everybody has a different vision.
Mm,
But even if you're very positional, like Guardiola,
mm,
or you're very relationalist, whatever you desire, I think everybody believes in a rhythm and intensity within
yeah.
football.
100%.
Unless you're trying to manipulate your opponent, in which
Mm.
case
I
that's
think
different.
yeah, that's where one of my values in terms of the sessions, in terms of high intensity, like I'm really big on high intensity, and getting players, like you said, creating pictures, scenarios that they'll play in the game. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, no, it's very interesting. Okay, so in terms of your role, what's your role, and what does that look like day to day? Um, yeah. So what do you do at the club, and what's your role?
Yeah. So my role is a sports psychologist coach. So that's a little bit strange for I think many
Mm,
people. But
different.
now, yeah, it's different. Yeah. But now in the day and age of video analysis
Mm,
coaches, we're seeing, I think there's a guy who used to work at Liverpool and Manchester and now works for the City Group.
okay.
We're seeing a move towards people having an idea of what other people are doing.
Yeah.
Because as a sports psychologist, I think it's very important that the sports psychologist understands football and
Mm,
understands the needs and the necessities of the player. Why is that player not turning with the ball and then automatically driving? What's that? What is that? Well,
yeah.
is that an interpretation from the instruction from the coach or a misunderstanding of the system? Or is he or she not interpreting the space well? All that comes from an understanding of football. But then at the same time, looking at things from a coach's perspective and understanding how you can improve different things in relation to everything from core principles
Mm,
to minute details, which I think is very much in the zeitgeist here in Spain. It's concentrating on the small details as well
yeah.
as the big. Because if all the small details are taken care of, then usually you can start to go at the macro more than anything else.
Mm. Also, yeah. So what age groups are you involved in?
So I work with under 16 and under 18.
Oh, nice.
You'll see me. I think that sometimes this is confused. You'll see me on pitch
Mm,
like anyone else.
mm,
For all intents and purposes, could be confused that I wasn't doing anything to do with psychology,
mm,
and that's not a bad thing. And the
mm,
reason that's not a bad thing is because I'm. So, for example, maybe I'm talking about communication one day.
mm,
So I put a big emphasis upon the players taking responsibility
mm,
within training. So a good example is a centre back who is passing a ball, or as we say here in Spain, filtering a ball through to a central midfielder. So I put a huge emphasis upon communication and responsibility within the training. So he
yeah.
will have to communicate what's happening to the
Mm,
central midfielder because he's able to look at that entire play, have a very good vision of what's going on. So he should be saying whether that player can turn if he has space, and
mm,
obviously every culture has words for these things, or play it back. And by doing things like this, you create a collective consciousness about the importance of personality development.
yeah. And character, isn't it?
Exactly,
Mm,
exactly. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear your opinion on this because for me, I think the characters are going out the game, and I don't think the game is better for it.
yeah. No, I agree. I think within a session, you got, and within life, again, everyone talk about player development, but you got to build the person first before you build the player, I think. And like within sessions and on the pitch and even off the pitch, like, I think character's massive. Um, because you want someone that's gonna, communicate, you want a leader, you want to kind of develop them skills for them to go on and hopefully, play professional. But also if they don't play professional, they can link their skills to whatever they're going to go into. So yeah, I'm big on personality. I'm big on character. So yeah.
Yeah, I often I'm in the process of writing a book about this, so I
Mm,
won't give away too much.
no problem.
Just because hopefully it might be good. It might
Mm,
be awful, but hopefully it's good.
mm,
I one of the things that I think is really, really important is in your culture, do you understand the people?
mm, yeah.
So I recently visited the club, a very high level club in that country.
Mm,
And within that club, I was having a conversation with someone who was within the context very important.
mm,
And I asked them why they weren't committing fouls. Why is there no fouls in training?
mm,
And he said to me, if you're interested in that, go and watch X Club, right?
mm,
And he said it in a really polite way. He
yeah.
didn't mean it in a nasty way. He was having a joke and he had a smile on his face, and that's great. But what I got from that is you don't know your culture,
Mm,
because this country is not known for its hard hitting midfielders or its bitey defenders or its aggressive nature. Quite the opposite, actually.
mm,
And I think that within that conversation, it gave me the realization that each country needs to know itself.
yeah.
And each culture within a country needs to know itself in order to know what do we need to improve here. Because in order to be the complete athlete, you need to be calm in the right moment,
Yeah.
self-regulation. You need to be aggressive in the right moment, arousal. You
Mm,
need to deal with pressure, auto-discipline. So
mm,
we all need those things, but unless you know your own culture and where you're from. For example, I'm from a very working class area in
yeah.
Merseyside. I know my culture. I know myself very well.
Yeah.
So I know what I need to work on and where I need to uptake and where I need to go. And I think that we make an assumption about many cultures without actually understanding them, without understanding what needs to be improved
Yeah.
mentally.
No, yeah, I agree, and probably that's why you've traveled the world, isn't it? And in terms of different cultures, different experience, you can kind of go back to that and relate to that. Like similar to you, like going to Brazil was kind of a big challenge, and but also it opened my eyes in terms of that's why I talked about passion, because when I was in Brazil, I saw a lot of passion and footballs everywhere. And
Yeah.
people talk about um the Brazilians, 13 maybe 20 years ago or 10 years ago, like how did they become so technically good? But you see kids, play on sand, you see them play on different surfaces, you know, and
Yeah.
yeah, and they just focus a lot on technique, like technique, even coaches as well, right foot, left foot. Is it very similar in Spain in terms of technique, or is it more
Wow.
positional play and stuff like that? Like what's the standouts in the session?
Well, I just want to mention something about this because I
Yeah.
think it's really interesting, the Brazilian thing.
Mm,
Are you aware of toxoplasticity? Let me just pull it up so I say it right because I'm
mm,
gonna get it wrong.
mm.
Are you aware of the toxoplasma parasite?
No.
Right, okay. This might be interesting to you. So in
Mm,
Brazil, they
mm,
have this parasite that's really, really regular.
mm.
It's carried by cats.
Okay.
And it's really, really common. So to give you an idea, 50% of France used to have it,
Mm,
and it makes people more aggressive.
okay.
Now, not in a zombie crazy way. Before
Mm,
anyone listening to this
mm,
takes it the wrong way, it's not like that.
mm.
Just give you a competitive edge.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that they theorized why the Brazilians are so, as you say,
Mm.
passionate, because to them,
That's normal.
mm, yeah, that's
Mm.
normal. And if they lose a little five first five game,
Oh, there's a war.
yeah, exactly,
Mm,
right? Exactly.
mm.
So I think in that regard, Spain is very, very similar. Now I don't know if they also have the same cat parasite. I have no idea. And please, anyone listening to this who's Brazilian, take this with a pinch of salt. I am not a biologist. I am an idiot coach and sports psychologist. But the point I'm trying to make is all of those variables can't make it up to make the technique so important within
Yeah.
Spain. Because if you see the lads playing, or for example, whenever we have in one of the teams I play, we have a rondo where two players enter fast each time, and it's just one touch.
Yeah.
7 players, one touch, 2 players just flying in on the pressure, and it's just one touch, and they can't take more than one touch, and it's so high paced, it's
Yeah.
unreal, and
Amazing.
I have to control the players entering, and I have to give advice about the press on players, but at the same time, I'm counting the amount of
Passes. Mm.
no, someone else is counting the passes. But they don't do a lot of counting passes in Spain. They more count the steals.
Okay.
So the idea really is like they're running in, and if I count that wrong, which inevitably now and again I will, not because I can't count Lee, because I think I've mastered that one, just because it's happening so fast, right?
Yeah, yeah, of course.
They absolutely lose their heads with me.
Oh no.
They lose their heads with me. It's a big deal. And
Yeah,
these are
yeah,
like, 16-year-old lads, and they're looking at me like, you've done me out of something here.
yeah,
And there's no consequence, like nobody's going home, you know what I mean? But
yeah,
yeah, you take it very seriously, the
yeah.
technique. And technique here is, I honestly think technique here is almost second to none.
Mm.
Maybe that's changing. I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm not sure.
Nice, nice. So like I said, what is your go-to? So when you, if you had a group, like a group of players right now, like what is your go-to in terms of session plans, or what would you do in terms of the session? How would it start, like the warm-up, 2 practices or 1 practice and then into a game? What would your go-to sessions or session?
Well, it should be activation,
Yep.
activation, physical coach, but everything involving a ball.
Mm.
So one of the ones I love is when they have to do 1v1 in the
Okay.
activation,
Yeah.
uh, and then the 1v1 in a team structure as well,
Mm.
which involves sprinting towards a rest defense, and then the rest defense, how do they handle the different angles,
Mm.
and then they have to move backwards with the player in order to cope with the attacking, and eventually try and shuffle a player to one side. Then moving on to the micro, which would always be something of a small-sided game, which to the outside might look like a rondo,
Yeah.
more of a 4v4 +1.
Yep.
A 4v4 +1 with one person acting in the middle. What I like to do is I like to involve chaos within the game.
Yeah. 100%.
So that one would involve different rules
Mm.
throughout the first exercise. So one of the rules that I love to implement is that the player who passes the ball to the +1 has to receive it
Okay.
before they can continue to maintain the ball, and then maybe score in minis. What that does is it progresses the activity from a normal activity into a cognitively challenging,
Mm.
difficult activity, where I am thinking as a player, before we score, because they're maintaining the ball, before
Mm.
we score, I have to pass it to this +1, and then he has to give it back to me. So I can't give it him unless it's the right moment.
Yeah.
And what that does is it puts the players in a mode of um, understanding, scanning,
Yeah.
producing a working memory, working on inhibition, which I think there was a study in Ajax that showed that inhibition within football is the biggest regulator of cognitive success.
Yeah.
And then moving on to the second part, I would involve macro, a meso version of that. So bigger pitch, 7v7, with similar rules. but more based around maintaining the ball rather than anything else without goals.
Yeah.
Based on a transition of two players on either side who play for both teams, and then a 5+5+1 in the middle to keep the ball. And then obviously the players on the outside playing in their original position. So there would be centre backs, for example. And then in the middle, working towards a more chaos environment, where one of the variants I like to do in that type of exercise is saying to the players, you can't progress it unless you start in the middle, but then you receive it out wide to progress.
Yeah.
And what that does is that works on something like an inverted wing back who then moves
Rolling
himself.
inside. Yeah.
Yeah, who then moves himself inside or outside.
Mm.
And that's how I think that most presses are beat, when players don't just think vertically, they think horizontally. How can I
Yeah.
move horizontally? How can I beat this press?
Yeah.
And then moving on to the final part of the session, which would be attack versus defense, for example,
Yeah.
using you with two goals. Never won the defense without the option of scoring.
Yeah.
But with one team primarily starting with the ball, and then as a result practicing attacking against defense, and practicing set movements throughout that, but giving the players liberty within the final third to actually do what they want, but then coaching them throughout that and talking about how they need to, how they need to bear that in mind, and how we're going to beat the opposite team using these movements, but not analytically.
Yeah.
Because again, I think that you're wasting so much time that over the long time of a season, yes, you might win that game, but over the long time of the season, you're actually going to inhibit their progression.
And that moves on to my next question. In terms of player development, how do you see individual player development within Spain? Is it more team focused, or is it more individual based, or is it a bit of both?
I think it's a bit of both. I think that Spanish teams are very aware of the idea that there's a there's a need to produce players, and the
Yeah.
academies here are excellent.
Yeah.
But I think there's also a huge desire to win.
Yeah.
Uh, I I stand in both camps with this. I think that sometimes, as a coach, I always want to win,
Yeah.
but I think that what difference does it make if Phil Foden was in a team that came first or second in his league? Probably not that much.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that it depends what you want to do. Do you want to win leagues, or do you want to make players? Because
That's it.
if you want to make players, it maybe it looks a little bit different.
Yeah.
Not wholly different, because I should still be trying to win games,
Mm.
but yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah.
individual work that goes on, a lot of trying to get the most out of players and improve them. But then again, the players here, what I always say about the Spanish system is the minimum
Mm.
level is so high.
Yeah.
The minimum level is so high that I've seen players in local teams who, or in the third division ref, who would, for example, walk into teams at high levels. Spain is a gold mine that's yet to be
Yeah.
plundered in terms of players. I can't believe that some of the clubs in the other leagues haven't yet come in and just went, right, we're going to look at just the third division.
Yeah. It's interesting. Last question. Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years in terms of your coaching or career?
Yeah, I think that's a lovely question. Thank you for asking. I'm very happy where I am.
Mm.
However, saying that, if I was able to go to a club where they were to take my ideas, you know, to the next level, so to speak, or that whether
Yep.
they were able to place a lot of trust in me, I could see myself working in a Scandinavian club. I really could.
Nice.
I think that the development and the way they do things, the progression they're showing at the moment is incredible.
Mm.
And then from there, hopefully, who knows, maybe the Premier League or somewhere like that.
Mm.
Never say never, eh? I mean, nobody told me I was going to make it to Villareal, so.
Yeah, it's an amazing journey. But yeah, like Chris, it's been a pleasure, mate. Thank you for joining, and it was a pleasure understanding your journey. It was a pleasure to kind of your journey in terms of coaching abroad. I'm going to reach out to a lot of coaches working in different countries, different challenges, but your role is unique. So yeah, like, wish you all the best with your journey, and we'll stay in touch. But really appreciate you coming on.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Lee. And I really appreciate talking to you. I'm very jealous of the journey you're having at the moment. I've got to be honest. I was desperate to get to Japan a few years ago.
Yeah.
And who knows? Maybe one day that dream will be fulfilled.
Yeah, football's a small world, so you never know where we're gonna cross paths. So,
Definitely, mate.
and Japan's a wonderful place. Interesting as well. So, Kris, have a good one, and we'll catch up soon. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.